This video is sponsored by Squarespace. More on that later. Hi friends, my name is Al, a little star nerd. Welcome to today's video. Before we get into it, I want to thank my patrons. Your names are on screen. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here. You guys are the best. If you don't know, I have a Patreon. On that Patreon, we do fun exclusive stuff every month. A podcast, a video, a postcard, a sticker, and more. If that interests you or you want to support me further and you want some fun goodies out of it, go check that out. Listen, there are some art supplies that I just don't like for various reasons. There's multiple reasons, some of which are made up. You know, I just decide I don't like something, and so I never really give it a chance. But there are some supplies that I dislike for valid reasons. And I think I dislike watercolor pencils for a valid reason. I've had these for a really long time. We'll talk about my thoughts on watercolor pencils. We'll talk about why I'm using these specific ones. We've got all sorts of stuff to talk about in the voiceover. The point is, today we're trying watercolor pencils. We're giving them a fair shot. I did research for this video on how to properly use them, just to make sure I give them the fairest chance possible. We're breaking on this bad boy. You haven't seen her in a long time. We're using the watercolor sketchbook, again, to make sure I give them a fair chance. And believe it or not, I'm actually genuinely excited to use these. It could go really bad. It could go badly. But I feel like maybe it could be good. I have 24 pencils here of different colors, and I think I have good colors. We're going to do some landscapes because that's what I mostly saw people doing. Also, I just feel like I've done a lot of portraiture lately, which is good. I love portraiture, but we get it. Okay, let's do something else. So we're doing some landscapes. We're going to use watercolor pencils, and we're going to see if I still hate them or if maybe they actually do serve some sort of purpose. I think I will enjoy using them today, but do I think my mind will be changed on watercolors and I'm going to start using them? No. No, I do not. Listen, this is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. It's going to be an experience. And I honestly think it's going to move really quickly. I feel like these are not a supply, especially because of the size that I'm going to be doing stuff at. This is small paper. Whoa, okay. I feel like this is going to be a fast process, but we'll see. I don't know. I hope I like it. I hope I have fun. I hope I don't hate it and find it miserable. I'm just rambling. I feel like I'm forgetting to say something, but I guess not. Without further ado, let's test one of my most hated, most disliked art supplies, watercolor pencils. Let's go. Actually, before we do get into it, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is a great all-in-one website platform that allows creatives, freelancers, etc. to represent themselves online professionally, to stand out, to look cool. Whatever it is you're trying to do online, whether it's sell stuff, connect to your audience, or just represent yourself online, create a portfolio, Squarespace has all the tools you need. Website design isn't what I would call the easiest, most accessible, most intuitive thing to do, but Squarespace makes it really easy for anybody. To start off, they have a bunch of templates to choose from with all sorts of use cases in mind. So whatever you're trying to do, whatever your website is about, they've got something that's going to work for you. But of course, those templates are fully customizable using Fluid Engine. Fluid Engine is basically a drag and drop function, which allows you to customize literally every inch of your website with all sorts of fun features. Like I said, they allow you to do pretty much anything you can need, including member-only areas. You can password protect certain areas of your website and make it accessible only to members. It allows you to better monetize your content and connect with your community. If that sounds good to you, if you want to further your brand, start a business, you want to create a portfolio, whatever it is, Squarespace has the tools for you. Stand out online, make a beautiful website using Squarespace. You can go to squarespace.com to start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/littlestarnerd for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace. Thank you for checking out Squarespace. Now, let's go try some watercolor pencils. So let me start off with telling you about the supplies that I'm using today. I've had quite a few sets of watercolor pencils throughout my time. In fact, I believe maybe one of my first ever videos is of me reviewing Arteza woodless watercolor pencils, maybe, if I remember right. A couple of brands have sent sets to me, large sets as well, like a variety of colors, but I've gotten rid of all of them over time because these are supplies that I just don't use, and obviously, as the title says, I don't like them. So I've gotten rid of all of them except for, of course, the set that I'm using today. These are very, very old pencils that I'm using, it's funny, I looked them up just now and there's a very odd, vague Amazon listing that has this set with the packaging as one of the photos. All the other photos are of different packaging, but that's kind of weird. But yeah, this is an old set because it's actually some of my inherited supplies. My dad is also a bit of an artist, and some of my first ever nice quality supplies were actually hand-me-downs from him, which were kept in this hard plastic green school pencil case. And these were some of the supplies in there. For a long time, they were my only colored pencils that I had. I used them as watercolor pencils a few times. Mostly I used them as just colored pencils, but perhaps you can tell by the size of these bad boys, I hardly used them at all. And I guess my dad didn't really use them much either. He was always more of a heavy-handed doodler, so I'm not surprised. But yeah, these have not gotten much use over many, many, many years. So I don't know when he got these. I don't know the actual age. I know some of the supplies that I was given are from maybe the 80s. I was given old sketchbooks that might even be older than that. But these don't seem crazy old. That was a bit of a concern when I decided to use them for this video, that maybe they might have expired in some way, but eventually I decided to use them anyways. I figured it would just be best to use materials that I have rather than go out and buy a whole set of watercolor pencils, knowing I might never use them again. That just seemed wasteful. I think it ended up being fine. I don't think their age made any difference in the performance of them, but I certainly will never know. Anyways, besides the pencils, I used my regular paintbrushes and of course my watercolor sketchbook. I have no doubt that they would have worked fine in my Strathmore Mixed Media book, but when I was doing some research about how to use these pencils properly, artists kept stressing the importance of using watercolor paper specifically, which I think might just be being hey, you can't use printer paper. But I don't know, I thought I would set myself up for a hopeful success and I followed their advice. Before we talk about today's process, let me tell you why I don't like watercolor pencils. And let me also say that this opinion is not, an objective opinion. It's a super subjective one. I am fully aware that there are artists out there who love these supplies and can make great stuff with them. I'm not saying they're bad objectively, just that my perspective from my own art practice, I just don't get them. I just don't get it. Overall, I feel like watercolor pencils are literally the most pointless supplies ever. They're such a dumb combination of two art supplies that I feel like no one asked for or needed. There are pastel pencils, right? And I love those. They make a lot of sense to me. They take stick, chalk, pastel, which are messy and bulky and short. They're hard to hold, hard to get tiny details because they're fat. They put those in a much more manageable and comfortable form. Turning a messy stick of chalk into a pencil makes sense to me. It adds a lot to the medium. But watercolor pencils? What does that add? How does that help? Watercolors can be easily controlled and are great for details as long as you're using the right brush. They move easily, they're not messy. Depending on your palette, they're easy to use and easy to travel with. So what is the benefit of putting them into pencil form? I can't wrap my head around it. I literally don't get it. While doing my research, I found that there are a few ways to use watercolor pencils. Some of them made sense, and some of them dumbfounded me. One artist suggested getting a specific special palette, which allowed you to use the pencil to scribble on it, and then dip into that scribble with a brush, and then use it like watercolor. And I'm not kidding, I had to pause the video and take a moment just to think. Because why? What is that? If that is what you want to do, if that's how you want to use them, that's fine, I don't care. But that's just adding an extra step. It's just a watercolor palette, but more work. What is the point of them being pencils? I don't get it. That one really baffled me. But yeah, there are two other main methods, which do make more sense. One of which is to draw with colored pencils directly onto paper, then use a paintbrush on top to move around the pigment, turn them into watercolors. Easy. And then finally, you can dip your pencil into water and draw with it to get really vibrant, juicy lines. That last method I can see utility for. It definitely changes the way the pencils perform and look. It's kind of unique to those pencils. The closest medium that I can think of that would achieve similar results would be something like oil pastels or some sort of waxy thing, like artist crayons maybe. So that's unique in that way, and so I can see how that would be cool, functional, special, worthwhile. And theoretically, I can see how drawing with them and then using the brush on top is also cool and unique and functional. But to be honest, I still don't see how that's any better or different or more useful or more interesting than just using watercolors. Like, it doesn't seem to add any sort of control to it. It doesn't allow for like more detail. It doesn't speed up the process. I don't understand what benefits come from doing it this way. And even with saying like, it doesn't need to be beneficial, it doesn't need to be better, I still don't understand what's fun or interesting about adding this extra step. I don't see how it changes the results. Of course, once again, that is just from my perspective. People could just find it fun. The process might literally just make more sense to the way that their brains work compared to me. I don't know. But yeah, my biggest problem with these supplies is that, to me, they just seem totally useless. I'd rather just use watercolors. Every time I've used them, I've been disappointed and again, I just didn't get it. I didn't know how to approach using them, didn't know how to take advantage of them to get the best performance out of them, didn't understand what made them special or different. So the results of my work were always either just using them as colored pencils or using them really badly as watercolors. But like I said, I did research for today. I prepared. I watched a few videos and read some articles all about how to properly use watercolor pencils. And those videos got me genuinely excited. The artists talked about them like they were this hidden gem that were just terminally misunderstood, and as long as you knew how to properly use them, you would love them. And I watched some artists making some beautiful, stunning, super vibrant pieces with them, and I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe these will actually be super fun and cool to use. So I was excited. I was totally ready to have my mind changed about their uselessness. I was ready to see purpose in these pencils. I picked out some landscape references from Pinterest, which will be linked below, because I thought that would be the best way to use them. And I got out my sketchbook. I was ready. I was armed with the proper techniques. I was enthusiastic. I was going in with a positive mindset. I knew what I was doing this time. And then, my enthusiasm quickly waned. I started laying down light washes with the pencils, trying to keep the lines short and light so they wouldn't mark the paper and they'd be, kind of easy to blend out. Kind of thinking the same way of using a marker, right? When you're trying to get you're trying to block in a large area, trying to keep it from being streaky. I didn't press too hard to make sure that the lighter colors would stay light, especially because I had a pretty limited number of pencils and didn't have all of the colors that I would have liked to have. The first piece had a lot of layering and a lot of atmosphere, so I was a little confused on what part to work on first. I had no idea how much layering they could take on top of each other, how well they'd layer over each other. I didn't know if they'd be opaque at all, if they would show up. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how these interacted. So I had to go about it strategically. This isn't gouache where I can just layer as much as I want and everything will show up the way I want it. It's watercolor, which on its own is already difficult in layering. You have to think about it mathematically. It was even more so here. I did pretty much the top half, the sky, the mountains, and then I decided to apply the water before moving on. And yeah, I don't know. I think I did what I was supposed to in terms of technique. I'm sure there are ways that I could do better and improve, obviously. But I feel like I did it right enough. But I definitely wasn't happy with the way the colors kind of moved and behaved. It was definitely a weird way of working, watercoloring line art, but the line art was also watercolor. So I had to get the pigment to move where I wanted it and gradient where I wanted it. I had to make sure that this area is saturated or darker, this area is lighter. But also I had to avoid blending it all together, and I had to preserve some areas as more defined, more saturated, basically keep a line there. But also I had to not let ugly well lines get in the way of the piece. It was confusing, weird, it was really difficult to get control of, to keep track of. It was very overwhelming to me. It was hard to, it just is a very different way where I had laid down all of this color and then I had to go in and redo the color, but there's already stuff there that it's conflicting and competing with. It's just a very different way of working. And once you add the water, I'm sure with practice it gets easier, but it was just very hard to preserve everything that I had just put down. Another problem I had, which frankly was entirely my fault, I should have swatched all the pencils first, was that the colors did not at all look the same as when they were dry versus when they were wet. There were a couple of different brown shades, and I would put them down dry and I'd be like, wow, this is the perfect color. And then I would wet it out later and I'd be like, this is literally a completely different color. That happened quite a few times. I also did a lot of layering of colors while dry in the hopes of mixing them to get the color I wanted, to dull them down, desaturate them, darken them, whatever. But I found they really didn't mix well like that. I wasn't doing proper ratios, maybe. I don't know. I don't think it would have been better or easier to do one color, wet it out, let it dry, do another color. Like, I don't know what would have been better, but it wasn't working the way I was doing it. So there was a lot of struggle for me with just trying to achieve the right colors that I was going for, which if you don't see the reference photo, it really doesn't matter at all, but it was still really annoying and a roadblock. Still talking about the first painting, I moved on to the bottom half with a slightly adjusted strategy. I basically tried to fill in as much as possible with a slightly heavier hand to get more saturation. I wanted to get everything down and then decided I would go back in and do a second layer with more detail. But again, when it came to adding water, my expectations were not met at all. I think I was way too heavy-handed with the water and not at all controlled enough. I think I was maybe a little frustrated and just kind of going ham maybe. Although I still have no idea how I should or could have done it differently to achieve more control and preserve the areas of color that I wanted. Like, should I have gone section by section? But then that would have been obvious. The well lines would have looked weird. It would have looked segmented. I don't know. Did I need less water? I don't know how to do it differently. Basically, it all blended together a little too much. I was trying to achieve the same effect I had seen in one of the video tutorials, where there were lots of small blots of color next to each other, and then when the water was applied, it looked like this really beautiful, localized wet on wet technique, where all the colors blended together, but still stayed where they were supposed to. For me, it all just became one big blob of one dull color. I didn't think to manually preserve lights by picking up pigment with a paper towel or brush. I lost all the darks while mixing, and overall it just got super one note, and all of the areas became one blob, and I lost any form or dimension. So I went back in and found that it was really hard to get darks dark enough. They didn't seem to layer super well. Some of the areas had been totally washed out of any pigment at all, and I had to go back in with a much heavier hand with the dry colored pencils. It all just felt very counterintuitive, and it felt like I would have achieved way more with just watercolors. At one point, I was basically just using the colored pencils with no intention of using water again at all, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that is kind of in my head what I'm assuming part of the idea of the colored pencils is. I don't think it's bad to keep them dry, but I definitely felt like I had more control that way, which I don't think is the point. I think, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I should be able to wet them. I also want to say I have no idea what the quality of my pencil set is. It might be for total beginners. Maybe they kind of suck, and that's why I had the issues that I did. Some of the issues. Although I think they seemed high quality enough, to me. The actual performance in terms of movement and not leaving marks and streaks on the page, when I wet them, I think they did all of that stuff beautifully. But in terms of pigment and saturation and it lasting on the paper, I did find myself frustrated. So yeah, some of my issues really might just be because these supplies aren't great, and I would have no idea. Anyways, on to the second piece. This one I approached pretty differently, and instead of getting all the colors down dry at once, I wanted to do it in stages, so that way it didn't all blend together into one messy piece. I came across a lot of the same issues, losing pigmentation and saturation, not achieving the contrast and darkness I wanted, the dry colors not mixing well, and a lot of the wet colors not being the same colors I put down when dry. The fun part was definitely going in with a super heavy hand, getting all the detail in. When I finally figured out how to actually achieve dark colors, that was super, super satisfying. It was also really fun in both pieces to dip the colored pencils into water and getting really intense tree stumps and dark details with them, or being able to layer lighter colors a bit with that added oomph of the wet lead. Throughout this piece, I have to say that my suspicions of watercolor pencils were confirmed. While they have a softness to them that's atmospheric and nice, I think that could have also been made with just watercolors.
I think both of these could have been completed to a better level with just watercolor and maybe colored pencils on top for extra detail if desired. I don't like the lack of control and the strange well lines. I don't like the messiness, and I really don't like the sapped saturation that I see when I look at these finished pieces. Overall, I still find them genuinely useless supplies. I didn't see how this added anything to my experience or the final results. Even doing the research, I thought I understood these pencils. After using them, I still don't understand what makes them worthwhile or makes them a necessary tool to have in your toolbox. I don't understand why we would want these two supplies to be mixed together. I just don't get it. I don't think these pieces ended up terribly. I just don't think that I achieved anything good. Like, they just seem like quick, messy, soft watercolor pieces instead of the interesting and refined and textured pieces that I wanted. I do think there's some texture, which I do like, but I don't know. I just am not impressed by these at all.
Honestly, I did not have as much fun as I thought I would. I was excited to come to the studio this morning and work with this stuff. I'm trying to decide if I like it. For a second there, I was like, you know what, I actually, it's not, you heard my thoughts, it's not something that I want to use. I'm not thrilled with the results, but I was like, I'm not thrilled with the experience, but at least I'm okay with the results. But they're looking worse. I was thinking like, wow, at least they're really vibrant and really cool looking, and they've got kind of a fun, illustrative, soft vibe to them. But now they just look messy and like pale. Like they don't even, like I thought that they were going to be, like before I was looking at them and I was like, wow, this really pops off the page. It's very vibrant, very saturated, but it's not. It looks super messy. It looks like really chalky watercolors that I'm using for the first time as a child. Like up in here, like I hate that. It's okay. It's fine. I think if I kept going, I think if I tried harder, I could have made it all more saturated. I don't know how I feel. I feel very conflicted right now. Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird time. Yeah, I'm only somewhat disappointed because I did know that I would come out of this still feeling like that they're not a useful supply. But I am surprised and disappointed that I don't like them more. I didn't think I was suddenly going to be like, wow, I need to use these all the time. But I did think that I would do stuff that I liked. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've just really confirmed my own opinion that I don't like them. Not that they're bad supplies overall, but that these are, to me, in my artistic experience and my practice, they are the most useless supply. But yeah, that's it for today. I gave it a chance. I tried my best. It didn't happen. That's okay. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. I need to put all this stuff away, but thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring. Bye.